The thunder made the walls tremble just as the warden's phone began to ring, sharp, insistent, as if the storm itself had dialed the number. In a white hallway that smelled of bleach and rain, the man in orange stopped walking. His hands were cuffed. His eyes were not. They found the glass of the visitation door and waited, because he had asked for only one thing before the clock ran out. "Let him in," Daniel said, voice held together by thread. "My dog, please." On the other side of the glass, a prison officer pulled the handle. The door opened on a blast of wet night air and the low, broken whine of a dog who did not understand doors or clocks or the strange gray silence of last hours. A blocky shape of brown fur barreled inside, paws skittering across polished linoleum, tail beating like a frantic metronome. "Buddy," Daniel exhaled. The name was a benediction. They had taken everything else, his wallet, his belt, his job, the last 6 years. But here, in a room painted the color of old paper, they gave him this. Buddy reached him and tried to climb his lap, his weight, solid, honest, thumping against Daniel's knees. A prison officer cleared his throat. "Keep him low. No jumping. 5 minutes." The warden, Michael Hart, stood off to the side, rain dotting his suit collar. He watched with a complicated quiet, the kind of stillness a man learns after decades of saying yes and no to pleas that deserve both. On a bench, a woman tightened her hold on a small notebook. Her name was Sarah, a local reporter who had been covering the case since the night fire swallowed a house and blamed a man who swore he was trying to save it. She had petitioned the warden to allow the dog. She had used words like closure, dignity, mercy, as if any single word could do that kind of heavy lifting. She watched the dog now, her eyes burning the way eyes burn when you don't blink because you can't. Emma. The shelter worker who had kept Buddy after animal control found him the night of the fire. Stood near the door with a towel draped over her arm. She had worried the whole drive here that the dog wouldn't remember, that 6 years had rewritten the smell of home. But Buddy remembered. You could see it in the way he pressed his head against Daniel's chest, drawing steady circles with his nose, mapping a face he had never forgotten. "Hey, boy," Daniel whispered, bending his shackled wrists awkwardly to rub the dog's neck. "You got gray on your chin." "You look official," Buddy's ears flicked. He leaned into Daniel's touch the way the earth leans toward rain, and then, small, strange, Buddy pulled back and fixed on something outside the room. His muscles tightened. His ears pricked. His eyes went hard as flint. From the doorway came the shuffle of feet. Observers filing in for the last act, raincoats loosening, umbrellas dripping little puddles on the tile. Among them was a man in a navy jacket. He kept near the wall, hat low. Buddy's tail froze mid-wag. A rumble started deep in his throat, like a drumbeat far away. "Buddy?" Emma said quietly. The dog took a low step forward and then another. His nose worked the air. The man in the navy jacket shifted, the brim of his hat lifting just enough to show a square face and a scar that broke his eyebrow into 2 separate thoughts. Sarah stiffened. She knew that face. John Keller, the neighbor who said he saw Daniel run from the burning house, the witness whose testimony had iced 12 jurors into a single verdict. Buddy's growl deepened. Not wild, not hysterical, focused. He was scenting something specific. "Warden?" Sarah's voice threaded across the room. May I ask who's authorized to be here?" "Immediate family, council, approved press," Warden Hart said. His tone held the fatigue of rain on tin roofs. "And those with registered interest in the case." John Keller lifted his chin. "I'm the registered interest." "My cousin died in that fire." Daniel's jaw clicked. He didn't look at John. He knelt into the pressure of the leash as Buddy inched forward. Rain rattled the glass. Somewhere far away, a buzzer griped about a door being open too long. 5 minutes, the officer repeated, glancing at the clock. The second hand kept time with the rain. Buddy moved to the end of his leash and then turned his head. He looked at Daniel, spoke a secret in the blink of an eye, and tugged again toward John. Daniel didn't think. He opened his hands and let the leash slide. The officer reacted at once. "No, he stays with—" "Hold," Warden Hart said, lifting a hand. His eyes had narrowed, calculating a risk that felt as old as his bones. "Let's see." Buddy patted toward John Keller. The man shifted his weight, a defensive posture pretending to be boredom. The dog stood a foot away and sniffed the hem of the navy jacket, then the cuff. He moved to the man's hand. A flat, ridiculous thing happened. Buddy sat. He looked up at John, ears forward, body taut, as if he had just found the missing piece in a game no one realized they were playing. Emma's breath hitched. "He's alerting," she whispered. "Alerting to what?" the officer demanded. Sarah answered without looking away from the dog. "He was trained before Daniel found him. Not fully, but he remembers commands. Emma told me he alerted to accelerants when he was a trainee. It never stuck enough for certification, but the imprint's there." "Accelerants," Warden Hart repeated. The word fell in the room like a nail, small and very heavy. John Keller barked a laugh that didn't reach his eyes. "Your mutt's broken. I filled my car at a gas station like everybody else in the rain." Buddy leaned in, nose pressing along a pocket on the navy jacket. The cloth was dark, but darker still was a small patch shaped like a spill. The dog made a small sound, high and precise. He pawed the pocket once. "The room tightened, sir," the warden said, voice quiet. "I'll need you to come forward. On what grounds?" John snapped, red climbing his neck. "Because a dog sniffed my coat?" "Because a man is scheduled to die in an hour, and I have jurisdiction within these walls," Warden Hart said. "And because I don't ignore growing alarms." A correctional officer stepped forward. The jacket was reluctantly shrugged off. Buddy nosed it, then sat again. The officer's hand slid into the pocket and came out with a small metal lighter. Old, scratched, engraved with letters flattened by years of sliding against coins. Sarah leaned in. "What does it say?" The officer squinted. "JS." A tremor went through Daniel, subtle as a breath. "That was my boss," he said. "Jack Simmons. He died in the fire." "Could be anyone's initials," John said tightly. He held himself very still, like a board held across a wash of water, believing stillness could keep it floating. Sarah's pen moved without her. "Jack Simmons had an old army lighter," she whispered, memory flipping like a book to a page she hadn't known she saved. He used to click it when he was nervous. In the interview transcripts, he clicked it so much the audio tech complained. "Where'd you get this?" Warden Hart asked. "The thrift store," John shot back. "Or no, I found it years ago in my truck." Maybe he left it there once. No law against keeping a souvenir. The warden's eyes became two hard coins. "There is a law against keeping evidence." The storm hit a new note. Sirens, distant but real. Warden. It was Grace, the chaplain, stepping forward from the back, where she had been a quiet shape in a gray sweater. "If you believe there's cause, you can request a delay. The governor can grant a temporary stay." "You know that. I know the law," he murmured. He looked at Daniel. The man in orange didn't plead. He sat there with his dog's fur under his hands and watched the door like a horizon that might deliver. The warden lifted his phone. In stories, the call always comes in the nick of time. Someone once told Sarah. In real life, she had learned, calls sometimes bumped into each other like strangers in the rain. Warden Hart called the governor. Buddy lay down beside Daniel, his head on the man's boot, eyes half closed, but never fully. The officers moved gently around them, as if fire might be everywhere again if they spoke too loud. Emma stood frozen with her towel clutched to her chest, just in case Buddy needed to be dried before the end of the world. "Governor," the warden said into the phone, voice rope tight. "This is Michael Hart at Green Ridge. I have new information that may bear directly on the case of Daniel Pierce." Seconds elongated, turned to minutes. The governor's voice, brassy with distance, pressed through the line. The warden spoke in low, precise phrases. Dog alert, lighter, initials, witness with possession, the storm that had a way of filling silences with thunder. At last, the warden lowered the phone. The room inhaled. "We have a 2-hour stay," he announced. Daniel's hands shook. He pressed his forehead to Buddy's neck. "Good boy," he whispered. Good boy," John Keller swore under his breath. He grabbed for the jacket and stopped when the officer's hand closed gently over his wrist. "You'll need to answer some questions," the officer said. "It's raining pretty hard outside. Might be a long evening." Sarah felt her heart slam against her ribs like a bird against a window. She moved toward the warden. "May I call Detective Howard?" He was first on the Simmons fire. He always felt the timeline was off. The warden nodded. Call everyone. If this is going to be a night, it's not going to be a quiet one. They gathered in a small conference room where the fluorescent light hummed like bees. Buddy lay near Daniel's chair, as if body heat and hope alone could anchor a man to this side of an hour. Detective Howard arrived, rain slicking his gray hair to his forehead. He looked old and tired and so angry at the weather. They set the lighter on the table. Howard slipped on gloves as tender as prayer. He turned the lighter over like a precious coin. "I'll get a rush for Prince and Trace," he said, even though he was not a man who believed in rushes anymore. "We'll check the engraver's records. If the dog hit on accelerant, we'll see what kind and how old. These things hold scent." John's jaw worked. "This is insanity. A circus. You're all dancing because a dog wagged at a pocket." "Funny," Detective Howard said without smiling. "That dog can't lie." "You can." John opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "I didn't mean for anyone to get hurt," he said too fast. Silence poured over the table like cold water. "He asked me to scare him. Jack Simmons. He had insurance. He had debts. He had that laugh that made you want to punch him. He said just scorch the edges so the adjusters would think their wiring was bad. I used a can from my garage, everybody's got one, and a rag. I was supposed to do a show, not a disaster. But he went back in for a file or some cash and then..." He swallowed. "Then you showed up," he said, eyes cutting to Daniel. "You and your dog playing hero." The room tilted. The fluorescent hum sharpened into a single deadly note. "You set the fire," Sarah said, words flat as a gavel. John lifted his hands, a gesture of surrender shaped like a shrug. Yeah. It was as if the confession surprised him by how easy it was to say. "But I wasn't going to kill anyone. Jack was supposed to be outside. And when he wasn't, you watched me pulled inside it," Daniel said, voice raw. "You watched me drag him toward the back door until the ceiling came down." "You looked guilty as sin," John said, hating the memory for how comfortably it had lived in him. "And the dog, your dog, he came out with soot and you came out with blood and it fit like a story." Buddy's ear twitched. He whined as if absolution were a sound dogs could make. Warden Hart stood very still. He had put men to death. He had read the paperwork and pressed the buttons and carried chains that had no mercy in them. He looked at Daniel now and felt something shift in the foundation of the work he had built his life upon. He let the weight of that shift settle, and then he set his jaw. "This confession will be recorded," he said. "We will corroborate with evidence, but sir," he looked hard at John, "I am advising you to secure counsel. By the time the prince came back, one clear set matching Jack Simmons, one partial that could be Daniel's from the night of the fire, and a new overlay that glazed the metal like a second skin belonging to John Keller. The clock that had once been a cannon turned mercifully into a metronome. The governor's stay extended to a full reprieve pending retrial. The storm slid away, a dark cloak shrugged off the shoulders of the sky. Dawn found the prison's rails steaming, and the earth breathing like someone who had just remembered how. In the visitation room, the one with walls the color of old paper, Buddy yawned like a lion cub and then set his chin on Daniel's knee. So many releases happen on paper. This one happened in fur and breath and the soft tick of claws on tile. It took months for the machine of justice to unwind what it had wound. But the first lock clicked that night, when Daniel finally stepped through a gate with a simple bag of state-issue clothes and the weight of 6 years of time that would not return. Buddy shot forward, hit his chest, nearly toppled him, and then licked his chin like there was no such thing as yesterday. Emma cried. Sarah cried. Detective Howard cleared his throat and said he had something in his eye. Warden Hart stood in the sunlight, hat off, hair unexpected in its humanity. He reached out his hand to Daniel. For a breath, they looked like two men meeting on a morning where nothing terrible had ever happened. "Take care of him," the warden said. Nodding at Buddy. "That's what he did for me," Daniel answered, voice breaking in the best possible way. They walked away from the razor wire, the dog between them, like a bridge built out of muscle and warmth. A breeze lifted and carried the smell of cut grass, gasoline from the road, a bakery 2 blocks down that had decided this morning should smell like bread. At a crosswalk, Buddy sat and looked up. His eyes were the color of toasted sugar and truth. Daniel reached down and scratched behind his ear. You saved my life, he said softly. You and a storm and a warden who listened. Buddy thumped his tail on the sidewalk. He didn't care about words like exoneration or confession. He cared about home. He cared about when the sky is blue and when it is not, and who is walking beside him either way. Sarah raised her camera and got a single shot. A man, a dog, a gate opening. The picture went in the paper and then everywhere else. People sent letters to the prison, some to Daniel, many to Warden Hart, a few to Buddy, written in crooked child print. Good dog, they said. Good dog. Justice, when it comes late, is not lighter. But sometimes it is softer. Sometimes it arrives with a wagging tail and a nose that knows the difference between the truth and a story dressed in smoke. That night, Daniel sat on the back steps of the small house Emma loaned him to get started, Buddy's head heavy on his thigh. The cicadas sawed the dark in half. Somewhere a train said its long, lonely vow. Daniel thought of flames and rain and glass, of a coin-bright lighter and a confession that cracked open a room. He thought of a warden who chose a harder path because it was right, of a reporter who refused to stop listening, of a shelter worker who kept a dog's heart soft and ready. He thought of the way Buddy had sat in front of the truth, as if truth were a person who needed rescuing. Too, sometimes the last wish is not a goodbye. Sometimes it's a beginning with teeth marks on it, a rope you pull yourself across with both hands shaking. Sometimes a good dog does what courts and clocks cannot. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more.